Siobhan Arnold. I am a visual artist and I work at Space for Art. One of the things that I really love to do is work with embroidery and with basically sewing, making drawings out of sewing or thread. So today we're going to work with a number of different items that are pretty easy to find at any kind of sewing shop or Michael's Crafts. That's probably a place that some of you guys have been to. And we have a variety of things that are helpful to use when you want to do a drawing project with thread. We've got embroidery floss. These are little skeins of thread that come in 6 strands, all different colors, and it also comes in different kinds of texture. So threads, obviously, scissors. You could use, I have my little tiny sewing scissors, and I put this actually on a string so that I can put it over my head and then I don't lose it. The next thing that you need is a needle, right? So this is a package of embroidery needles, and embroidery needles are basically the same as any kind of sewing needle, but they generally have a little bit of a wider hole or wider opening at the top. This package says Gold-Eye embroidery needles numbers 3 through 9, and the numbers correspond to the size of the hole and the size of the needle. I tend to use a larger needle because it's easier to work with. It's easier to put the thread into. So I have a pin cushion here that I keep my needles in. The other kind of key thing for drawing with thread is to have a hoop or a frame of some sort. Of course, the other thing that you absolutely need is something to sew on. What is your base going to be? What's your background going to be? I just have, for example, a nice simple woven cotton piece of fabric that is sturdy and doesn't stretch. As far as getting your image onto the fabric that you use, there are a lot of ways to do that. So let's start today by learning how to do a basic line in embroidery. And the way that you do that is by creating something called a running stitch. So the very first thing that you need to do before we get into talking about how to do the running stitch is get our needle and our thread. I'm going to grab one of my embroidery needles that I like to work with. Let's go with this one. So I'm going to pull out a length that's about as long as my arm. That's a good length to start with. So I'm going to cut it. So usually I will separate the threads out into strands of 2. And so if I just start pulling those out, sometimes it gets a little tangled up, so you want to go real slow. Then what I have to do, this is sometimes the hard part for folks, is to thread the needle. So luckily embroidery needles have a nice wide open head there. So this might be gross to some of you, but this is what I do. I lick it, and then it makes it into a nice point there. It takes a little while, but there we go. So now my thread is in there. Leave a couple inches out, like that's probably about 4 inches. And you're tying a knot at the bottom so that the thread does not pull all the way through the fabric when you start your stitching. So to tie a knot, I just simply take this tail here and I just wrap it around and pull it through, tie a little knot, and I just try to push it so that my knot is close to the bottom. And then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to double knot it to make sure that it doesn't come through the little hole in the fabric. So we're going to start with the running stitch, the basic running stitch. And what that means is it's just a basic straight stitch, like a dashed line. So we're going to start with doing this top one, which is green, and that is the running stitch. So I'm going to show you now how to put the fabric into a hoop. You unscrew it so that the two pieces can come apart. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're going to take the one without the hardware and you're going to put it underneath the fabric where you want to place the hoop frame, and then you take the part that has the hardware on it and you put it over the top, and you just kind of slide it over the top so that it holds everything nice and taut like that. I'm going to start underneath, and what I'm doing is you can't really see what you're doing, but you kind of have to poke your needle in to get a sense of where you are on your design. And then I'm going to just take it and pierce the fabric and come right through on the bottom of my line, the very bottom, and pull it through. And I don't pull my thread through very fast because sometimes it'll get bunched up, and that's kind of annoying. I'm just going to start making my dashed line or my running stitch by going, oh, I don't know, it's probably about a 1/2 inch. Poking it back down through the top and pulling it through nice and slowly. So you're going over, under, over, under. So I'm going to go back up, and I've left a blank spot where my stitch is. Pulling it through, and then I'm going another about 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, whatever that is. Pulling that through nice and slowly like that. And then up again, and then back down. Now what I'm doing is I'm going back up through the same hole that I created with the first stitch. Okay, so we're almost at the end here. So now I'm going to tie a knot. I'm going to tie a knot to anchor it. So I pull my needle through, and then what I do is I hold my knot down towards the fabric, and I'll use another finger to push on the knot slightly while I pull tight, and that keeps my knot right next to the fabric and not up here. Okay, and that's that, and then you just trim it off. So some people ask me, how do I come up with a design when I'm starting to do a new project? So I'll look through my pictures to come up with a design idea. And if I'm just not seeing it, then I'll start looking through books, or I will look online and do a Google search like everybody does these days. But I usually like to start with my own ideas. Maybe I'll come up with a design that is based on a drawing that I've done in the past, or maybe it's a drawing that somebody else did that I really like and I'd like to use, and I've asked their permission to use. So for this image, we're going to make a little cactus here, and what you need is a piece of tracing paper. So tracing paper is the kind of paper that you can kind of see through like that. So I'm just going to take a piece of tracing paper here and tear one off. put that over the top, take a pencil, and you just draw the design using your pencil. You just trace it. And then what you do is you take your drawing, and this is really easy. You just pin this on. First of all, decide where you want your image on the fabric. Like, do you want it in the middle, on the side? Where is it going to go? Stick it right in the middle here. And you pin it on, at least in 2 corners. Sometimes 3 is good. And you pin over under that same kind of thing that we did with the sewing. So it's on there like that. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to sew right on top of the paper. But we're going to do something called a basting stitch. And a basting stitch is like a long running stitch. Here's one where I can show you how I started doing this basting stitch right on top of the paper. So I've done the outline of the pot. I've done the outline in brown there, kind of gold. I've done an outline of the cactus all the way around. And I skipped over the flower and the pattern on the pot, but you could go over that pattern or not. Really, what this is doing is transferring kind of the general outline of my image onto the fabric, not the paper. And what we're going to do is we're going to tear the paper away. And what you end up with is a nice outline. So I'll show you what's going to happen. We're going to tear the paper away, starting here. And you don't yank it off. You do want to be kind of careful about it. So you just kind of pull it, and it will pull some of your stitches, but that's okay. Don't worry. So see how it got kind of loose there? No big deal. I can go back and I can pull on the end and kind of tighten it back up. Get all the paper off. And that's that. All my paper's off. Whoops. I can tighten that piece up here. Sometimes I'll take my needle and I'll go to the back and know where I want it to tighten and just kind of pull. And it tightens my little spots that look kind of loose. Okay, so we have a nice outline of our cactus. And let's say we want to start filling that line in. Right, so I'm going to do my double knot. So I knot right over the top of the first one. And then I'm going to go in and look for where I want to start. Let's say I want to start down here. And I'm filling in the gaps and creating a little running stitch to go around, right? And the more times you go over a line, the thicker it becomes. It's actually good to think about that. How solid of a line do you want? Is it going to be an outline? Are you going to use another color to do an outline? Right, so I'm just going back up and I'm filling in so that I have a nice line going around. So now this is what it will look like when you start filling it in. So I created some running stitches all through to create the texture of the cactus. And I actually filled in the cactus flowers just without tracing anything. I just thought it would be more fun to make it up, like what I thought looked good. And what you're seeing are a few knots in there. And that's another kind of technique called a French knot that I can show you another time. And then you can also see that I added and started embellishing some of the details in the pot there. And instead of filling in everywhere with lines, I just kind of made dashed lines to give it a little bit of texture. And so I'm happy with my design, but maybe I would make another version. Oh, I know, it's missing its thorns. So I think I'm gonna have to go back through and maybe add some yellow thorns. So there's our design. My name's Siobhan Arnold, and thanks for joining us today. And I will be happy to show you some new techniques and stitches in the next episode. Have a great day.